So today we're continuing a teaching series that we started last week called Crushing It, where we're looking at the problem of pride. We're looking at how pride is a destructive force in the heart of all people, and how as followers of Jesus, we're called to recognize that, offer that to God, receive grace in the face of our pride, and then try to tame it with the Lord's help. You may not know this, but of all the stuff that God calls out in the scriptures as bad, as sinful, as things that we should mark and avoid, pride is near the top of the list. We don't talk about it very much, but we should talk about it a lot, because the scriptures lead us to believe that at the heart of so many issues for human beings is pride. We've defined pride like this. Pride is an obsession with self. Really what it is it's prioritizing yourself above and beyond everybody and anything else. Pride is prizing and prioritizing and protecting yourself above everything else. And of course, it leads then to a whole host of other problems. And today what we're going to talk about is something that I believe the scriptures tell us feeds the problem of pride. That if you look at the problem of pride and you start to pry it open and peel it back, what you find at the heart of it is this. What you'll find is an attitude of ingratitude. What fuels our pride is a lack of gratitude. Ingratitude at its core is an inability to recognize two things. Number one, that you are rich, and number two, that you are a recipient. If you're ungrateful, it means you're walking around believing that you are owed everything or that you have earned everything, and you don't think you have enough of anything. And yet what we need to remember is that we are wealthy, and it's all a gift. Now you might say, well, Pastor Matt, maybe you're wealthy. I'm not wealthy. To which I would say, oh, yes, you are. I think you are rich in at least three things. You are rich in people, you are rich in power, and you are rich in possessions. If you have a couple of circles in which you run, where you wield some influence, people at home tend to listen to you because you're dad. People at work tend to listen to you because you're in middle management. Guess what? You're rich in power. If you've got a couple of circles where people love you and they're going to miss you when you're gone, like at home, they're going to miss you when you're gone. At work, they're going to miss you when you're gone. Your friend group, they're going to miss you when you're gone. Your church, they're going to miss you when you're gone. Then guess what? You're rich in people. And if you've got some stuff, then you're rich in possessions as well. Now, some of you might say, well, Pastor Matt, that's where I got you. I am not rich in possessions. To which I say, oh, yes, you are. Let me prove it to you. I just came back from Kenya, and we had an incredible time meeting some unbelievable people. We met with a lot of pastors and church planters. Our church body is growing. It's trying to grow in that part of the world. And so we met with a handful of pastors who are starting new congregations, and they've got groups of people that are eager to meet. One church just put together, they built a building. They're very proud of it. They took us to it. They showed us this building. This is the building, the church building that they built. It is a mud and stick building that holds about 20 people, made from found items on the 1/8 of an acre that they were able to purchase. And the pastor that we met was incredibly proud of this building. Now he recognizes that it's just a start. They want to build something bigger, something a little better, but this is their new church building for this brand new church. We are wealthy. Just a little perspective, and I know you know some of these statistics, but like if your household income is at or above $40,000 a year, you are in the top 10% of wealth earners in the world. If your household income is above $50,000 a year, you're not just in the top 10% or the top 5%, you're in the top 0.3%, meaning you're wealthier than 99.97% of the world. We are wealthy. And at the heart of ingratitude is an inability to comprehend that we are rich, and that we are recipients, that it's all a gift of grace from God. Let's jump back to Job, because Job was wealthy too. Job was incredibly blessed as well. Just rehash some of his blessings. Job chapter 1, verses 1 through 3. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was blameless and upright. He's a good dude. One who feared God and turned away from evil. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. He's very blessed. He possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and very many servants. He's like the Elon Musk of the Old Testament, so that this man was the greatest of all the people in the East. Job was incredibly wealthy. He had a huge family, a healthy family, thousands of animals, tons of employees. He's rich, he's got prestige, and he's got power. And what else does it say in verse 1? It says, on top of that, he's a man of character. He's a really, really good guy. Job is evidence, I think, that there's nothing wrong with being blessed. Nothing at all. Job is evidence that you can be extremely blessed and still be a really good person. Great. Where it goes wrong is where you refuse to see that it is all a gift, even though you've worked really hard for it, even though you have accomplished with your own 2 hands so much of it, even though at times you think that you have earned it or you're owed it. Where blessing goes south is when you think that it's only the result of your own effort, and that it's not ultimately a gift. And if you refuse to step back from your accomplishments, if you refuse to reframe the things in your life, your people, your power, your possessions, and understand that ultimately it is all a gift that's been given from God, a whole bunch of gross stuff starts to grow in your life. It gives birth to things like greed and an attitude of entitlement, which is why the scriptures tell us over and over and over again, be wary of pride and be really wary of the thing that fuels it, which is an inability to recognize that God owns all things and gives all things. Because if you don't recognize that, it's going to make you into an entitled and greedy person. It is going to make you gross, and nobody wants to be gross. I grew up in the middle of Michigan on an old farm, and when I was a little kid, we would go walking in the woods around our property. And every once in a while, we would stumble upon like a stagnant old pond, like a little body of water that smells really bad, is full of all kind of terrible creatures. It's got like green scum on the top of it. It's just really, really gross. And the only thing it's good for is throwing your little brother into it. You've seen one of those, right? Well, you know how something becomes a stagnant pond. It becomes a stagnant pond because at some point, stuff goes in, but then nothing ever goes out or moves around. So water goes in and it just sits there. And it becomes stagnant and it becomes gross. And so rather than run clean and clear like the Great Lakes where water comes in and water flows out and there's this constant movement, it just gets stuck and stagnant and kind of grows. That's what happens to you and me. We get all these blessings, we have all these gifts of God, and if there's no movement in us of recognizing that it comes from Him or sharing it with other people, it just becomes stuck and it becomes stagnant and it starts to stink and we become entitled and greedy and we just get gross. Which is why in Deuteronomy, for example, we get a warning like this. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 17 says, beware. It's not often in the scriptures you get the word beware. It's trying to get our attention. Hey, beware lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gotten me this wealth. Be very careful lest you say in your heart, it's really all me. I mean, I'm really talented. I kind of deserve it. I earned it. I climbed my way up the ladder. It's all me. I had a little help, but it's mostly me. Beware. You shall remember, you must remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the power to get wealth. It is He who gives you the power to get stuff. Ingratitude makes you into a stagnant pond of a person. You gather things in, And then the water never goes out in the form of thanks and praise or generosity. And so rather than run clean and clear, you just get gross, entitled, greedy, prideful. So then, how do we stay in a place of gratitude? How do we avoid getting stagnant and gross? Well, I think it comes down to something very simple, but not very easy. Something simple, but not easy to accomplish, something that's got to be folded into the regular rhythm of our life. I think we need to be reminded on a regular basis who we are. Through things like confession of our sins and sacrificial generosity. I'll talk about that more in just a second. We need to be humbled, and we need to come to a fresh understanding of who we really are. We need humility. We need to invite a reframing and a re-understanding of who we are into our lives over and over again. Do you know who you actually are? I've got an image that I think is a perfect picture of who you are and who I am. It's an image I've shared in the past, but it's so helpful that I can't help but share it again. You and I, we are turtles on a fence post. Have you seen this image before? Have you heard this phrase? It's a really helpful way to understand yourself. When you see a turtle on a fence post, there's a lot of questions you have. How'd it get there, right? But there's a couple things you know for sure. If you see a turtle on a fence post, you know two things for sure. It didn't get there on its own, and it won't move forward without any help. It didn't get there on its own. Somebody had to put it there, and it can't move forward, can't get down without any help. That's you. That's me. Turtle on a fence post. You didn't get where you are on your own, and you aren't going to move forward without any help. You got a great family that loves you and puts up with you and doesn't roll their eyes every time they hear from you? That's amazing. Turtle on a fence post. You got a job that pays you a good wage and you walk away from every day feeling really fulfilled? That's awesome. That's great. Turtle on a fence post. You got health in your body. You got a great exercise routine. You feel like you're in the healthiest season of your life. That's awesome. Turtle on a fence post. You got some investments that you have, you're feeling really comfortable, you feel very optimistic about your financial future, you feel like you made some really wise choices in your past that are paying off today. That's amazing. Turtle on a fence post. What you must remember is that wherever you are, you did not get there on your own. And you cannot go to where you want to go without some help. That's who we are. And we stay in that place of having that right understanding that it's all grace by embracing two practices that followers of Jesus have folded into the rhythms of their life to keep them humble and to make sure they have a right understanding of themselves. And those two simple practices are things we talk about all the time. Number one, a constant confession of your need for grace and receiving it over and over again. And then two, sacrificial generosity. These two things keep us in a place of understanding who we really are. It is darn near impossible to be filled with pride while also confessing your sin. And it is really hard to feel entitled and greedy when you are giving and sharing to somebody else in need. And these two habits of confessing and receiving the grace of God and then giving and sharing, these things help keep us in check and help us remember that it was all grace getting here and it is all grace going forward. All grace going forward. That's how we stay in the right place. As we embrace this and we try to squash some pride and cultivate gratitude, one of the things that you'll discover, and this is what we see in Job, is that as we keep pride in check by the grace of God and try to cultivate gratitude, one of the side effects, one of the blessings that comes from it, is greater resilience. Resilience is the ability to keep the faith in the face of difficulty. Resilience is the ability to keep moving forward in faith, even as life hands you awful things. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but at some point there will be awful things. At some point, the power and the people and the possessions, at some point these things change or they are lost in some way, shape, or form. Possessions are lost. People pass. Power and influence fade. And if you believe that you are entitled to these things, then when they disappear, and they will disappear, you will feel as though you have been robbed and wronged and your whole world falls apart. Or if you feel that you yourself earned these things and you built these things, then when they disappear, you will feel as though you have been robbed or wronged and your whole world falls apart. But if your understanding of self is built not on accomplishment, but built on grace and gratitude, then when these things go away, and they will go away, you are able to stand and still be filled with faith because you knew that you weren't entitled to these things or hadn't ultimately earned these things to begin with. It was all grace. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Look again at what Job says. Job loses everything. Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshipped. And he said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return." It's all grace. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. That's resilience. God gave, God took away. I wish he hadn't, but God is still good. In all of this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. This is upheld as one of the most profound expressions of faith in the face of tragedy that's ever been recorded. Job has lost all of his blessings. And he's able to say, "My heart is broken, my life is shattered, but my God is still good, and I'm going to be okay." How does that happen? The only way you are able to trust in the goodness of God when life is bad is by recognizing the goodness and grace of God when life is good. The only way you will be able to confess and recognize the goodness and grace of God when life is bad is by first recognizing it, giving thanks for it when life is good. Job believed that he was an undeserving recipient of such riches. And so he can trust that the same God who gave, the same God who took away, is a God who can give again. He knew it was all grace. Now, maybe you're here today and you're thinking, "Matt, on this particular day, pride is not my problem. On this particular day, I get what you're saying, that ingratitude fuels pride and we need to be more grateful and stay humble and realize it's all great." I get that, but I'm not struggling with that today. I struggle with it a lot, but I'm not struggling with it today. Today, I'm feeling more like Job in the aftermath of loss. I'm hurting. I've lost a lot of things. A lot of my blessings have left my hand. I've lost someone that I love. I'm in need of a job. My health is fading. My finances are an absolute wreck. I'm feeling like my hand is let go of or lost so many of the gifts and blessings. I'm feeling like Job standing in the ashes looking at ruins. And if that's where you are today, and I know that there's some of you here today who are feeling that, then my encouragement to you, my comfort that I could offer you is that you have been given a gift whereby you have even more reason than Job did to be confident of God's love for you, even in the face of loss, and his ability to care for you and provide for you going forward. Job was confident of God's goodness, but all Job had was a promise of God's goodness. Job's story takes place deep in the Old Testament, and all he had was a promise of God's goodness, and then the ability to offer sacrifices to kind of demonstrate his belief in God's goodness. Yes, I trust you. I think you're good. I know it all comes from you. But you and I, we have more. You have more than Job did. You have more reason to be confident. Job had a promise. You have a person. The promise that Job believed in looked forward to Jesus, but you have Jesus. Jesus is the promise of God's goodness in flesh. And Jesus has arrived into this world, and he has suffered under the losses of this world. He's died for the sins and the evils of this world. And he's risen out of the grave and proven that he's more powerful than all the terrible things in this world. He has declared a victory over all the awful things in this world. And he says that those who belong to him, who have faith in him, they can be sure and certain, despite the ups and downs of this world, that they too belong to God, that they are loved by God, and that they are never outside of the mercy and the goodness of God. And they don't have to look at themselves to be confident of that. They just look at him. They just have to look at Christ and know, I'm in, I'm loved, I'm cared for, I'm secure. You don't merely have a promise, you have a person. You have Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is God's guarantee of mercy and grace and provision. Jesus Christ and who he is and what he's done for you is your guarantee that even in the face of extreme loss, you can be confident that God is good and God has got you. And that the same God who gave and took away can give again and will see you through. When you doubt the goodness of God, look at the life and the death and the resurrection of God's own Son for you. And then say to yourself, I'm going to be okay. When my daughter was young, like 3 years old, I wanted to get her a piggy bank. I wanted to teach her to save and spend and give. The idea was she would get some birthday money, and we'd put a little bit in the bank to save, and then we'd take a little bit to church, and then she'd take a little bit and spend it on herself. And so in order to do that, we needed a piggy bank. And so I was looking for a piggy bank that not only had the hole at the top to put the money in, but it had like easy access in some other part of the bank to take money out, so we could give some to church or so that Dad could borrow some when we didn't have any cash. What I didn't want was one of the old school piggy banks. Remember the old school piggy banks where you can put money in, but in order to get it out, what'd you have to do? You had to break it open. That's what they mean by break the bank. I didn't want to do that. I wanted her to be able to easily access some of that stuff so it could not only go in, but it could also flow out and go through to church or to herself or to others, right? Now, I bring that up because, some of us are like old school piggy banks. That's why we're so prideful. That's why we have so little gratitude in our life. It's because stuff just goes in and it never comes out. It never comes out in the form of thank you, recognizing it's a gift. It never exits in the form of generosity to other people. You're always just looking out for yourself. You live your whole life without realizing that God and others have put in, and it never goes out. And sadly, when that happens, the only time those kind of people really ever open up and realize that they're recipients of grace or end up extending themselves in thanks and praise to God and others is when they get broken open. They get busted open by the hardships and the difficulties of life, and it's only then that they're like, oh yeah, I'm a recipient of grace, and There are other people. You don't have to be that kind of a bank, so to speak. My hope for you and for me is that it wouldn't take being broken open by the difficulties of this world for us to finally realize, oh, it's all grace. And I'm called to not just hold on to things, but in gratitude to offer things and share things. You don't have to be broken open by the hardships of the world. You can open yourself up. And that's the invitation this morning. Just recognize we're called to fight pride. At the heart of pride is a lack of gratitude. And we can fight ingratitude by opening ourselves up to God and simply saying, thank you. I realize it's all grace. It's all a gift. I'm a turtle on a fence post. It's not me. And we can cultivate gratitude by holding on to less and offering a little more to friends, to neighbors, to whomever. That's how we fight pride. And we avoid getting just too gross. And in the aftermath of loss, when the world has broken you open, I just encourage you to remember that you have even more reason to be confident in God's love than Job did, and Job was a great guy. You have Jesus, who has lived for you and died for you and risen for you and who's coming back for you, and who is God's guarantee to you that you are blessed, that you have received so much and will receive more, and that it's safe and it's free